This is Food for Thought with Deborah Walker. Hi, this is Deborah Walker. This is Food for Thought, and this week I have with me Angela Heap, who's the campaign's activist for Freedom4Health. How are you today, Angela?
I'm very well. Thank you ever so much for bringing me on. I'm really looking forward to today.
Brilliant. I'm really glad you're here. Now, firstly, give us an understanding of your background so that people know who exactly you are.
Absolutely. Always good to see. Well, I'm actually a fertility nutritionist. I specialise particularly in fertility. I'm absolutely passionate about that, and I help lots of couples all over the world, really, to actually help them to get pregnant, take them through that whole phase of pregnancy, and also support them, through breastfeeding and weaning. So it's kind of the whole package, really. But, what I do is such an important job, really, and I have such, a really good sort of feedback mechanism from people from that. We've been quite successful, and the year before last, I actually had an 80% success rate with pregnancy and getting people pregnant. So I do have a fantastic job. I'm passionate about it, and I love doing it, and I think that always helps. When you're doing what you love, really.
Yeah, you're right. I love the way you said I've got a fantastic feedback mechanism, which is basically people have babies.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the end result with me, and you go through the day. Sometimes things don't go according to plan, but then you get that phone call that says, I want you to know I'm pregnant, and you're one of the first people that actually find this out. So it's always amazing to be part of that sort of special time with people, because they feel they can talk to you, and they have any worries in the early stages. So it's I feel honoured to be part of that as well.
Now, my whole temptation now is to carry on along that lines, because I really get your passion, but actually I'll have you on for another show to talk about that, because actually I want to talk about your role with Freedom4Health and let's find out first how you became an activist, as you're called, with Freedom4Health, and why.
Well, I actually got involved with Freedom4Health because I saw that there was lots of need, really, to take the campaign forward. I was approached to become an activist in the actual organisation because, obviously, of my background being a practitioner myself. This always helps, being sort of very, very supportive of a cause that's going to be working with practitioners as well. So we're actually an organisation set up and managed with practitioners, and we're all about giving people sort of support around health choice, and that's what it's about. So Freedom4Health is really dedicated to ensuring freedom of healthcare choice for the public, complementary therapists, and also those providing natural medicine. And we're involved in all sorts of things, really. We promote natural and sustainable approaches to healthcare, and we're involved in campaigns such as the use of micronutrients, herbal products in healthcare, and the use of sort of genetically modified foods, and how that's kind of creeping into the UK now. But at the moment, we're actually really focused on sort of working around how natural healthcare practitioners in the UK are actually unnecessarily sort of being restricted by procedures, and basically telling them how they need to advertise their services and sort of goods as well. So we're talking about people who are actually selling things in natural health. So the organisation that's actually doing that is called the Advertising Standards Authority, and many of you probably will be aware of them, as they do actually call themselves the watchdogs in regards to advertising.
Now, do you want to go into more detail in regards to what specifically you've been doing around that arena to support practitioners with the Advertising Standards Agency?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, with what we do really is, understandably, a lot of practitioners are unaware of the ASA until something actually happens where they actually come on board with them, and they approach them via sort of email. They don't give them a call usually. It's usually via email first of all, and it's in relation to the advertising of their websites in particular. And I know the ASA did actually extend their remit to not just looking at print media, but also looking at website material, probably in the last 2 years. And at that time, there was a bit of a deluge, really, of people are being contacted by the ASA in, as they call it, the health and beauty area. And unfortunately, a lot of people were finding that they weren't getting much support from their associations or the federations on this. They went to them and a lot of them were actually just saying to them, well, you probably need to comply with the ASA because, they're a government body. But sadly, that isn't actually true. The ASA are a private limited company and as such don't really have, in our view, a remit to go around telling people that they need to amend their advertising according to the code that they've actually put together themselves. Their validity or their adjudications, which is how they actually sort of approach you. A lot of the legalistic terms they say in the letters, they will say, we believe that you need to prove what you're saying has some efficacy. There needs to be some evidence behind what you're saying. And then people tend to get into a bit of a dialogue with them where they start sort of giving their evidence. And we've had so many practitioners that have had trials that they've conducted themselves and with medical institutes, even with the NHS. And they've actually proved certain things to, I think, a really strong degree. But unfortunately, the ASA have actually come back to them and said, that's really not good enough. We don't agree with what you've said. And then it just becomes a little bit more nasty, really. And I think then practitioners do actually feel very, very harassed in this situation because if they don't actually comply with them, they give them a certain amount of time to comply with what they say their code says they've broken in regards to their advertising on their websites. But after that time, they will actually then almost name and shame them upon their website through an adjudication list, which is really interesting because this list basically lists, all sorts of things. You can either be on the official adjudication list or the actual informal one. And the official one gives you a lot more detail about what you've actually done in terms of which code area, which is very sort of specific that you've broken. And it should give a response back from the person in question if they've actually given a response. And if you're on the informal list, unfortunately, there isn't much information on that. It just says the name of the organisation, and that's the official name in Companies House if they've been registered through them, and just that they have actually been put on the informal adjudication list. So for people like myself who do really support practitioners, it's very difficult to find out more information about what happened in the first instance and why this actually came about. In a lot of instances, we believe it's through an organisation that has actually been, very, very active around, sort of looking at complementary therapies as something that they feel is quackery or something that they need to actually support, bringing that down to the same level as, looking at blind sort of trials and randomized trials and those kind of things, which unfortunately, if we all had the money to do those kind of trials, which is what a lot of drug companies actually do to prove efficacy of their product before it can go to market, these are the kind of things that they're actually saying we need to provide as practitioners and, sort of claiming things around certain vitamins and minerals that support the body, if you're a nutritionist, for instance, and then other areas. So it is really difficult, to sort of delve into this area and to prove, your modality. And you're almost fighting for your livelihood in a lot of cases. And many of the practitioners we have supported have been in situations where, the ASA have actually gone to their local paper, for instance, and their local paper have actually run a story on them, got a lot of the information wrong, and this has resulted in people's contracts for their clinics being terminated where they work. So they can actually do things that will reduce your livelihood. They can also, do things like, for instance, put you on their official naughty list, which doesn't really give you much of a problem, really. But if you then Google anyone, if you have new clients and they're interested in who you are and they just Google you, unfortunately, the adjudications, because of the way they work and the Google listings, actually comes quite high up in the Google listings there. So it's almost a way of attacking you as an organisation or as a practitioner by advertising itself. And again, that can have a very negative effect on you as a practitioner.
And it has had a hugely negative effect on some practitioners, hasn't it? Who have done a lot to actually prove their efficacy, because they do have the support of testing and things behind them, and yet it's still in some cases the ASA have actually still gone ahead and named and shamed them, haven't they?
Absolutely. And this interview comes at a really good time, because yesterday we brought together quite a number of practitioners from all over the country, to talk about their experiences with obviously the positive side of what they do, and obviously the negative side as well. So it's things like how the ASA has affected obviously their livelihoods and their emotional standing as well. Because a lot of people who work in this field, they're doing it because they're actually therapists and they like supporting people. And after sort of having their situation with the ASA, it does have a major emotional effect on them as well, because they're doing things as they see to support people's choice of healthcare. And, having that kind of almost physical attack from an organisation that's a private limited company and not an official government body really does sort of, put them on the back foot for a short amount of time. And again, it just depends on who you are as a practitioner and your personality. And luckily, we did have a group of very, very vocal people that we had interviewed yesterday who were incredibly supportive of what we do. We've helped them in an enormous amount of ways with how to approach the situation, because we have a lot of templates on our site and a lot of sort of support that we can give them. And, they were really, really grateful of that. And because of that, they came down to do a video for us to highlight the plight, because a lot of practitioners are completely unaware of, what happens to them if the Advertising Standards Authority get hold of them, and the level of harassment that can actually ensue really as part of that.
And this is the thing that in reality, isn't it? Is that it's a limited company, and you are talking in terms of harassment and fear. And this is quite shocking. I know that they're meant to be a regulatory body, and regulatory bodies can work for and against. They're a double-edged sword. Regulation goes through our lives in a number of ways, in ways that most people don't even realise are influencing them in their day-to-day decision-making and choices. But this is the thing, isn't it? Because in effect, they are a limited company, which is, and your words are, fear, bullying and harassment is appalling.
Absolutely. And their tagline, on their website is, their mission, their raison d'etre really is legal, decent, honest and truthful. And those things ring out in my ears every time I see what's happened to some of the practitioners that I'm dealing with and product suppliers. The level of harassment from them is just, absolutely ridiculous. And some of the evidence they put up front as well to say, we actually disagree with what your evidence is. And they come back with things in some instances, like, for instance, the Huffington Post. They actually refuted some of our practitioners' evidence from trials they'd been involved in and said, well, actually, we've got some more of our evidence ourselves, and, sort of put that forward. So, it's almost like you're having an argument with a 2-year-old in a lot of instances when you are dealing with the ASA. But unfortunately, if it was that, easy, it wouldn't be a problem. But, we've got some very high profile people dealing with the ASA who are actually, very sort of brought down by the whole situation, and for want of a better word, some of the trolls behind it and the ASA together work in a very much, of a pincer movement really to get people and practitioners to stop delivering what they're doing to the public, and then that's what we're really miffed about really, and we're really sort of supportive of practitioners and helping them to fight, and we get them right at rock bottom when they've just been hit by the ASA and they don't know where to turn. And so many people yesterday when we were interviewing them said, you don't know how much we've really been sort of grateful about the support you've given us, because emotionally it really does affect you, and you need someone to say, we're here for you, we're ready to fight for you, we'll help you, support you through this, and And that really is, worth its weight in gold, I think.
And the homeopaths, I remember the homeopaths when I was talking to Barry Tanner, and he was the homeopath organisation. They actually put together a very good argument, if I remember rightly, to the ASA, and in effect showed that the ASA actually had nobody there that truly understood what was being given to them, and therefore they had adjudicators who had no background in homeopathy or any complementary therapy at all, and therefore they were making decisions about what was being said from, in my opinion, a level of ignorance. I know, and it was most obvious that that's how the homeopathic organisation felt as well.
Absolutely. And it's just so frustrating if you are coming from, you are getting support from your association or federation. And I know the organisation you're talking about there, it's HMC 21. And the leader, I think, in that area who gets back to the ASA whenever they do sort of attack them is William Alderson, I think. And he's been absolutely amazing in terms of responding to all of their claims, coming back with almost 10 times the amount of evidence to what they're producing. And if you think about homeopathy, it's been used on the NHS and it has been, around for hundreds of thousands of years probably. And, we're talking about something that can provide evidence, but they choose obviously not to take that on board. And it's just incredibly frustrating for all concerned, because if you look at the board of the ASA, as you rightly said, there is nobody on there that comes from even a medical background, so people who understand how to run trials or know what, the importance of those are in terms of evidence. There's nobody there. They come from media and advertising areas. And I think in the past there were people from, pharmaceutical industries on there. So GlaxoSmithKline, and at the moment there's somebody on there from Procter & Gamble. So again, a little bit of a conflict of interest there because they're producing goods in the health and beauty industry. So may well be a conflict of interest to maybe some of the supplement companies that they regularly actually attack. I think the phytobiotics are constantly on the naughty list for the adjudication for the ASA, and they respond every time. So, they seem to be someone that they can tweak and they can get information out of. But our advice generally is to look on our website whenever you are approached by the ASA. If you feel you want to respond, there are many templates on there. Speak to your MP, which is what we would do in the first instance, because if we do get enough people actually contacting their MP, it does have to be raised in Parliament. And look at our templates, respond if you feel you want to, but if you don't, because they're a private limited company who has no authority whatsoever over what you do, you can actually just ignore them. And I think there's something incredibly cathartic about knowing that and understanding from a practitioner's point of view that you've got the support behind you of an organisation like Freedom4Health that can actually say, I know all about you guys. I'm not frightened. I know you're not a government body and therefore you have no authority to tell me to cease and desist or to do certain things. So I'm therefore going to ignore you. The worst thing that can happen with that is that they put you on their adjudication list, it's going to be the formal one rather than the informal one, because you look at the list of people that are on generally the informal ones, and they tend to be smaller practitioners, which I think, in my opinion, is an area where they feel they could probably bully them into submission. And they have had a dialogue with them, and they've got what they want. They've said to them, you can't say certain claims about what you do as a practitioner and how you support people. You have to take that off your website. For instance, we had a really prominent product supplier yesterday that we interviewed, Lady Care, Derek Price, who's the founder of the organisation, and probably the only one who's been involved in a court case with the ASA. And he provided absolutely oodles of evidence because he's been involved in a lot of trials with the NHS. He's got a product that basically is a magnet that helps with the autonomic nervous system, and he's worked with that area probably for the last 20 years and provided so much evidence as to how that supports things like leg ulcers. There was a trial in an NHS trust using that because they were having people coming to them saying, we've tried everything and your product seems to work. We want to do our own trial on that. And they now have that on prescription in the NHS for leg ulcers. He also uses it for the menopause, and he actually had Belinda Carlisle from the Go-Go's come to him directly without any coercing to talk about the product. And the ASA came back to him basically and said, you have to take down that website. Belinda can't say this. All she can say is, I use Lady Care and I have the menopause. So, there was no claims allowed whatsoever on the website that it worked at all. Bearing in mind that he's been involved with a prominent doctor who's run a lot of trials in this, Dr. Nigel Eccles, of Harley Street, and they've been working together for many years and conducted, loads of trials. He's working with the Endometriosis Society. I think it works for, period pains, all sorts. It's literally the cat's pajamas, this product, and it seems to do the trick. And I think, if you've got the trials there to prove it, who are the ASA really to actually, refute that? The NHS, are actually, happy to promote it. So, if they can do that, then I don't see what authority the ASA have coming from that.
So we're talking about trials to prove things, which they seem so bothered about. Where are the trials to prove the flu jab? Why aren't they all over the advertising of the flu jab?
Well, interesting thing to bring up, really, Debbie. I think they basically have devolved responsibility for anything to do with medicine to the General Medical Council, so the GMC. So they don't get involved in anything to do with pharmaceuticals or medical issues. But for some reason, they don't see that situation happening with devolving responsibility to the General Regulatory Council for complementary therapies, or the CNHC, the people that actually oversee complementary therapy. And you would think that that's what they would do to give themselves less of a hard time. I mean, personally, if I was working at the ASA and I knew there was a body that could actually look into this, I would actually just go, great. We've got a job working in other areas. I'm quite happy to involve working with the regulatory bodies for complementary medicine and allow them to sit on our board and make decisions or adjudications on the way that people advertise things. But unfortunately, that isn't the case. And there obviously has to be some reason behind that. And as we well know, complementary medicines does come into all sorts of areas of disrepute from people like the big pharmaceutical companies and food industries, really. So we're constantly under attack, I think, from that area, and they're always finding new ways to kind of work into that. Maybe the ASA, I haven't, we haven't got any proof at the moment, but this is something we're looking to do in the future, is to look at how the ASA works and try and look at it further, really.
Now, my audience wouldn't want you to go before I ask you a key question that's on my mind. Are the ASA part of curtailing freedom of speech around natural health, in your opinion?
Well, I do believe that, and we've had, a lot of support from a lady recently called Zoe Harcum. I don't know if you're aware of her blog. She works around diet, obesity, nutrition, and all those kind of areas, and she's a big proponent of, calories not being used all the time, and looking at rather than carbohydrates, looking at a balanced diet and supporting sort of weight and management of that through her own blog and the work that she does. She's put together lots of information because she's been attacked by the ASA, and she doesn't sell any products. So they've actually come to her on her website saying you can't say these things. You can't, look at weight loss and calories in and consumption of different foods. You've got to prove where your information comes from. And a lot of the information she's talking about is very much in nutrition circles at the moment, around things like the paleo diet, and the amount we consume in terms of carbohydrates and sugars and fats and those kind of things. It's being talked about widely. I think even the Swedish government are actually, sort of a strong proponent of this way of thinking in terms of diet and how we're getting it all wrong at the moment. But Zoe, is talking about it quite a lot. And they came to her basically and told her she needed to take her website information down when she's talking about this. And again, she was incredibly shocked to have somebody, A, from a private limited company come to her when she did a bit of research, and B, they were actually curtailing her freedom of speech. And that's what she's saying. You can't sort of say to me, we don't believe in what you're saying. If it's advertising, it's one thing, but when it's freedom of speech, it's another thing entirely, I think, and that's the first instance we've seen really where they're stepping outside of their remit here, and actually going to people who are, working on blogs and putting out their own opinions, as we believe, and based on some of the facts that she has, with her research, and actually saying you can't say that. So that's really interesting from our perspective, and a departure from their normal situation, shall we say.
So how do people get in contact, Angela, with Freedom for Health, and what events are you running in the future?
Well, Freedom4Health, you can get hold of us via email, which is contacts@freedom4health.com, and that's a number 4. So when you get that, and it's the same with the website, it's www.freedom4health.com. So that's how to get in touch with all our details. The other things we're actually quite involved in at the moment, on a much more of a positive side, is we're actually hoping to run in June this year something called Freedom for Health Day. And it's about expanding the opportunity of choice and giving people who maybe not necessarily would have been involved in working with natural medicine or working with practitioners in complementary health to actually try something for free. We're getting as many practitioners as we possibly can to be involved in this day, to offer some free health choices really through natural therapies. And hopefully that will actually give the practitioners some support, and also looking at complementary therapies, it will actually extend the remit, so people actually get the opportunity to try that for free, to see whether it works for them.
Perfect, Angela. Thank you very much.
That's no problem.